Hi, this is Rod Meldrum, the Book of Mormon Evidence guy.
And I'm Russ Barlow, Truth Seekers Foundation, creation and flood guy.
That's right. And we have been friends for, I think, since the pre-existence, actually. But for many years, we've had the opportunity to be friends. And we're here together. We're excited because in about another hour or two from now, we're going to be going to a special event here in Washington, D.C. We're going to be going to the residence of the ambassador of Tunisia.
That's right.
Along with dignitaries from all over the world, actually, and from the Smithsonian, from the church, and from other organizations and things. It's going to be a fantastic experience. Have you ever been to an event like this at an ambassador's residence?
Not at all. In fact, the Tunisian thing, what's interesting is they're kind of the long descendants of the Phoenicians, and that's really what this is about, is the Phoenicians.
Yeah.
And we owe the Phoenicians a lot of interesting things, like they've given us the phonetic alphabet.
Purple dye. Purple. So this is why we wear the purple shirt, because that's the Phoenicians' color.
That's right. That's the color, the royal color. And we have some really great things. But a lot of people have asked about have asked me about how did I get involved with the Phoenicia. And actually, my involvement with the Phoenicia started at the same time as yours did.
Right.
So let's tell that story real quickly.
Well, we were together, actually not purposely together. You were already out there waiting for some people to come on a tour that you were doing. Mm-hmm. And Heidi and I had gone out there just to kind of tootle around for a weekend. And we found ourselves in Ohio and called up and said, hey, let's go check out the Ohio Earthworks. And we get out there. It's a rainy day, and
golf had been canceled.
Well, and you're not supposed to go out onto this golf course. You have this observation place. You can go look at it, but there was nobody out there, and we thought, being who we are, let's just go out there. And we stood on this observation mound, looking straight down the observatory path of that, and hoping. We found out that later there was lightning strikes, and we're standing on the mound.
And by the way, this is Newark, Ohio, which is the Great Octagon and the Great Circle, which is the greatest, the largest temple complex made by the ancient Hopewell Mound Builder people in the world.
Right.
I don't think we even realized that at the time.
At the time, but they dated to about 200 A.D. At a time when there was great peace in the land. Imagine that, 200 A.D.
Yeah, this huge temple complex that actually has the entire plan of salvation embedded into the mounds themselves. I mean, everything. It's awesome. But anyway, so there we are. I'm out there. I think I was with Robert Fuller and his family. I can't remember who I was with.
Robert Fuller was going to meet us. We were waiting for them. So it was just the three of us. And we were just having a nice conversation. It was kind of right towards the evening.
Rain had stopped.
Yep.
They'd canceled all of the golf for the rest of the day. So but the rain had stopped. And so we were out there where we really wouldn't have been if there was actually golfing going on. Yes.
We were there.
And then we both remember there's a clubhouse, and then there's two people came out of the clubhouse and started walking directly towards us.
And speed walking.
Yes.
Like we're in trouble. We were deciding, should we run?
Yeah. So we actually did. We left the observation mound, and we began going back over to where the path is, where the public can go. And we just are getting over there about the same time they're arriving. I thought it was security. They're going to come throw us off the golf course.
And the guy gets there and he looks up and he kind of does this little double take. And he looks and stares at this guy, and Rod's thinking, what are you looking at?
I was expecting him to yell out, get off of those mounds. But instead,
he says, hey, aren't you that Rod Meldrum guy?
Then you got to understand, I mean, I was taken completely by surprise and shock because I don't know anybody.
This is before Rod's
Newark, Ohio.
Everybody knows. He's the beginning days of everybody. Now everybody knows it.
Well, a lot of people know me, but anyway.
Somebody would say, aren't you Rod Meldrum?
It is pretty interesting, but the bottom line is, and we came up and he said that, and I was like, well, yes, who are you? And he came up and said, well, my name is Keith Johnson, and he had his wife with him, Patty. And Keith Johnson came up and we started talking a little bit, and he said, we kind of just chit-chat a little bit, and then he said, so are you familiar with this project where they're going to be sailing a ship around Africa? And I said, no. What project? I didn't know about that. Right? Yeah.
Now Keith's from Florida, so he's a sailor, and he starts to expound on this.
Yes.
And he begins to tell us about this project of this ancient ship that's going to be built and sail around Africa.
Yeah, and I was just kind of, okay, so how does that, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, maybe that has something to do with it. He said, yeah, I think it could be something really cool. with this, and also he mentioned at that point in time that he had been selected, he had put in papers and applied for being in the process of being selected to be one of the crew members
on one of the legs
on the very first voyage of the Phoenicia, which was the voyage from Saudi Arabian Peninsula to America.
And the intent was to sail this 600 BC sailing ship all the way around the whole coastline of Africa, beginning up here in Saudi Arabia, around the Cape of Good Hope, and then just kind of periodically stopping up the coast. That was the plan.
Yeah. And he was going to be going from Mozambique to the Comoros Islands. I said Comora.
What's the capital of the Comoros Islands?
Well, let me spell it for you. It's Moroni.
Oh, that's Moroni.
Yeah, Moroni.
Yeah, it's nothing we know.
But we would know it as Moroni. Yes, there we go. so yeah, it's interesting that
Think about that.
Comoros
Islands
yes.
on the east side of the African continent with the capital city Moroni.
That Nephi and Lehi would have had to pass by as they were heading.
Just coincidence.
Yes, anyway, just interesting. Yes, okay, all right. So these are not the droids we're looking for. Okay, but anyway, so that's how we actually first met and learned about the Phoenicia expedition. And since that point in time, we've had all kinds of different things, but a lot of people...
Actually, that's not where we first met.
Right.
We should probably talk a little bit about that.
We should, because that's an interesting story.
We didn't have anything to do with geography or science. We were just a couple of dudes trying to sell windows.
Well,
we wanted to improve people's outlook.
We were working.
We just worked.
Yes.
I lived in Phoenix. I lived in Las Vegas.
Yeah, and we knew of each other. We were actually kind of friends because I had started a job in doing Anderson windows, and these guys became Anderson windows
Anderson
dealers.
Las Vegas. He was the rep that would come up.
Yeah.
And that's actually how we met.
Yeah.
Because you were the rep assigned to go help me sell windows.
Exactly, and so that's and it's a relationship that was made, like I said, long before this world, I think, because we would get together. I was living in Phoenix, and we'd come up to Las Vegas, and then we'd go out and talk to contractors during the day, and then we'd stay up all night talking after that. So
I don't know if any of you can imagine Rod talking a long time, but I learned that. So what happened?
We go to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning and get up at 6 and go after it again. It was interesting.
It made more sense that he stayed at my house than the hotel next time he came up.
There's no sense of having a hotel for 2 hours a night. So
we talked about everything too. Sometimes just young guy stuff.
Yes.
Just things that we do. But the most important thing that was resonated with us is we loved the gospel.
Yeah.
The gospel
and the Book of Mormon.
And we would talk about what's our role, what's our play in it. Mm-hmm. And we both had some really interesting experiences along the way that we had something big to do together.
Yeah.
And we didn't really know for sure what that was.
But as life normally happens, we basically kind of went about our different lives. And you were starting a business and kind of getting that rolling there in Las Vegas, and I was still working with the windows and doors down in Phoenix and that area.
And then you left and moved to Utah.
Yeah, and then I was able to sell my house and move to Utah and got a job up there with a company out of Boise, Idaho, and began working with Anderson Windows up there as a rep up in Utah. And amazingly enough, so Russ has several brothers and sisters. And a couple of those, and his dad actually has started the business up in Midvale, Utah.
Right.
High Bar Windows and Doors up there, and they became one of my dealers that I was working with and helping them in this whole process. Well, during that process, even though we had hit it off and we were friends, there's a couple of years where we just kind of didn't, we had things going on and so forth. So I remember that. We had a situation where I wanted to send him a Christmas card, and it's probably about November.
Before you get to that point.
Yes.
Remember what happened, though, is that in our way, we'd gone off and done our businesses, and about that time, you were in the soup preparedness business.
Yeah.
And we were down there in Las Vegas, and Y2K was coming. It was coming fast. And people were buying everything, and you were doing fantastic.
Yeah, we were killing it with the High Country Gourmet Foods, and they had about 20-something employees and about 15,000 square feet of manufacturing space, and we were just going at it. We were producing food, all kinds of food for about a dozen different food storage companies and things, and
then January 1st, 2000 happened, and the world hadn't blown up, and everybody said, We don't need any of that stuff. And the switch turned off for you.
It literally was like the December before, we were shipping out almost full semi loads every day of food everywhere. And long story short is that when January 1st came and everything didn't fall apart, all of a sudden the orders just stopped. We were actually manufacturers, so we were actually supplying other dealers. So we weren't really selling to the public per se. We were actually providing the product to 2 or 3 dozen other companies. And long story short is that it evaporated, and you couldn't give food storage away at that point in time. We found ourselves sitting on, having to let go of our employees and subless our building and do all kinds of things.
You end up going to work for this guy.
Yeah.
That we'll mention his name in a minute here, but you go to work for this guy doing research. Now I don't know this. I don't know anything about what's going on in your life because this moment and I'm over here in Las Vegas running a window company when the stock bubble burst, and all of a sudden housing shuts down, and they stop buying windows. And so I'm thinking, what happens if this doesn't work? Well,
by the way, folks, this is typical business, just so you know. This is how it works.
Up and down,
yeah,
sure.
Exactly.
And so I end up going to college thinking that's what I need. I need a degree. And what do? I go to college. I start taking every science class I can. Something happens. I love science, especially geology.
Yeah.
And earth science. And I don't know what's going on.
Well, you only live a few miles from one of the greatest geological features on the earth.
Like 10 of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, but one of the biggest ones that everybody knows is the Grand Canyon.
Right.
Which is right next, pretty close to your place there. So.
And I'm just down the road from Zion, and just up the road from lots of places in California. There's a lot of cool places.
Yeah. You're kind of right in the middle.
What were you doing? What were you studying?
Yeah, so I was studying. How am I going to feed my family? How are we going to do this? What am I going to do? We had closed down everything, but I just wanted to reconnect with Russ because it's been probably a couple of years.
But this is after you had started doing this research, because you've been doing that for 4 years while I'd been going to college for 4 years.
Yeah.
And that's the cool part, is that you're researching the true stuff, and I'm learning not so true stuff. But I don't know this yet. I just become really frustrated. Yeah. I'm really frustrated that you can't even have a conversation in a college classroom. And I'm a mature guy. I'm older. So there was all these kids there. And I'm so frustrated that you can't even bring up a creation story account. You can't seriously discuss or explore creation or alternatives other than evolution. It's not allowed to even talk about. That was so frustrating.
But the thing is, Russ, is that the creation is not really that important because, the Lord only put it in the scriptures 3 times.
That's all.
Well, I
beg to differ.
Well,
there's a few more.
Okay, well, but there's a 4th time too. But that's in the temple endowment. So I really think that maybe the Lord put that in the scripture so many times because He maybe wants us to know something about it.
Yeah, but you're giving away the punchline here.
Okay.
So you're over there learning the truth. Yes. I'm over here learning the alternative, modern secular science stuff.
Yeah, so from my perspective, basically, so I've gone through this really dark time in my life, and one of the things I love to tell people is, you know what, when the things are the worst, actually, look forward to those times, because when the things become the worst is when the Lord has, we have a magnet on our fridge that says sometimes the Lord has to make everything fall apart so He can put everything back together. And that really happened in my life. So basically, my world was falling apart. Then got with, like you said, with, should we name names or what?
Let's not tell him.
Okay. We won't just tell this yet.
We're going to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
In case he watches this.
Yes. But anyway, so then I had the opportunity to start working with another dear friend of mine who was working on a project. He had actually technically retired at about 30 years old, 31, 32 years old, had a huge business going on, had bought properties all over the place, and was really wanted to do something that was in his patriarchal blessing, actually. And he got me involved with this and said, hey, listen, Rod, he said, in fact, I'm just going to tell this little quick story. Mm-hmm. So I called him out of the blue and just told him, and said, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? He said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, actually, we've closed down our business, and I'm kind of looking for work now. They said, well, that is great. I was like, oh, fine. Yeah. I'm just telling you how my life was falling apart, and you're thinking this is great, right? He said, because I've been praying for years that you'd be able to come and help me with this other project. He says, and I don't even know how we're going to get the money, but basically he went and talked to a couple of people. I said, hey, yes, if Rod will come and help, then we'll help to cover him and we'll make sure his house payments get covered or whatever. And so I went to work for him on this project called the Universal Model. Yep. And so bottom line is that so I'd been working with we got to say the name. I can't not say the name now. Okay. No. Should we say it?
We say it.
Okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it's he's the Dean of Science. Okay, so it's the Dean of Science.
The Dean of Science.
The Dean of Science.
The Dean of Science. We'll give you the last name in just a
minute. Yes, but the Dean of Science. Okay, so I'm working with the Dean of Science, and we're doing all these experiments, and it's just awesome. I mean, some of the things that we're learning.
And specifically,
and I was just like,
what are you making? You're
yeah, so we are involved with the geological stuff, right, which has to do with the making of rocks and learning about geology and we've taken all kinds of trips to national parks and all kinds of places and done things together, trying to learn how did the Earth form. We have a scriptural account that tells us at least some order of some things, but we don't have a lot of detail about how the Earth was formed. Right. And we were doing these experiments. We were taking the most abundant mineral on the crust of the Earth, which is quartz, and learning how to make quartz crystals. So you were
growing quartz crystals
in our laboratory, yes. After we did a bunch of research on, because there's actually technology companies that actually do this, about 20 of them around the world that actually make quartz crystals commercially, and we wanted to find out how do they do this? What is that process? Because if we can know what that process is, it'd tell us something about how dinosaurs formed and how other things happen.
We're going to jump into that in a minute, but
yeah. So we're in this process,
crystals,
and we're doing this.
And you learn how to make sandstone out of those quartz crystals.
Yeah.
That's one of the processes.
We're able to take quartz crystals and double and triple their size in just hours, And so we were figuring this stuff out. So now we get to the point where it's November.
Yes, so let me bring you up to this point, because where I am, I'm going to school. Yes. I'm learning all the modern science version of how things are not made right, but made from a melt. Everything's an igneous rock. It's either metamorphic, igneous, or sedimentary, right? Well, sedimentary is not the original rock, and metamorphic's not the original rock.
It all starts with igneous, yes.
From fire, melt, or magma.
Because the Earth was a big ball of molten magma at one point, so everything came from that, yeah.
And I'm learning all that. And on a number of took extra field trips. It was a lot of fun. Every field trip I could go with the professors. We went out to this one particular the Red Rock Quarry, and I'm leaning against this sandstone wall, and it's red and white sandstone. And the professor says, okay, how did this sandstone form? Because it's not in layers. Yeah. It's like somebody threw a bucket of white paint on and splashed the white paint over the red. There's no defined way. Mm-hmm. I was excited to learn, except she said, we don't know. But the Spirit said to me right then, you will know how this is formed. Yeah. And that's what turned for me. I called my wife. I said, Heidi, I've got to start getting some equipment. We've got to build a lab. I'm going to know how sandstone is formed. I want to start doing this. And she and I talked about, let's start teaching kids. Because I was so frustrated to see these kids in college being taught all this crap and not being allowed to explore their faith. It's not even allowed. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to have a place where you could have faith-based exploration of scientific things. And you could just learn without having to destroy your faith. Yeah. So that's what I was thinking. I've got to learn how
sandstone is made. Forms. Yeah.
Now, we don't know each other. We haven't talked yet.
Right.
This is where that...
But what we've been doing in our laboratory down in Arizona, in the Mesa area, is we've been taking these things and we've been taking quartz and making quartz crystals bigger and bigger, and we decided at one point that what we need to do, we need to find out how wood and carbon-based life forms like bone, how does that turn into a rock? And how long does that process take? Because modern science says it's between 60 to 80 million years as a minimum to have a piece of wood or piece of bone turn into a rock.
So now that
but we knew how rocks actually form because we were doing it in the laboratory in our autoclaves. We were making quartz. And one of the experiments that we did, one of the first experiments that we did, we actually put wood into the system where we were making quartz. And instead of producing a nice quartz crystal in the top of the reactor, it produced all kinds of like almost like a geode on the inside, but it also produced something else. In the bottom of the reactor, we found sand. And there was no sand put into it. Yeah, the sand formed in the reactor. And that's when we started going, oh my gosh, is it possible that that explains why there's so much more sand on the earth than there is if you take everything was a big rock and everything breaks down slowly over time through erosion processes and so forth. You should find big rocks be primarily the most, and then you'd have smaller rocks and down to pebbles and so forth, and then down to sand, and then finally down to silts, which is the smallest particles basically. And there's an overabundance of sand around the earth. I mean, way more than there should have been. If you have that erosionary process, you should find the sand is the least amount because it's the furthest down the chain of erosion.
And then from my perspective, they're explaining to me that these big sand monoliths are being eroded from a mountain on the other side of the continent and blowing all the way across. And my question to them was, how is this sand so pure then? Where's the rest of the stuff in the sand? Yeah. Okay, maybe it's a plausible argument, but gosh, there were so many questions that I didn't have answers to, and the Spirit had said, you're going to know how sand is formed.
And so each one of us are kind of doing this. We're learning more about how sandstone forms and how rocks form and so forth, but we don't know
even know each other's working.
What's going on there. And so that's when I finally make this I call it. It was, to me, it was a very it was a pivotal phone call in my life. So I called him to find out his address so I could send him a Christmas card.
Okay. It's been a few years.
It's been a while.
5 years since we've talked.
And so we're talking about our families and so forth, and then I just had this strange feeling that I need to ask him an important question, because he started telling me about how he's been going back to school and he's learning all this stuff about science and I said and he said, I can't remember which came first. Did you tell me you were going to build the lab first, or did?
Well, first I wanted to talk to you just about wanting to teach. Well, actually, no. I was telling you what I was doing. You said, well, what do you want to do with that?
Yes.
I said, I want to teach.
What is it you want to do with your life? Because he had a window and door business, right? And I figured that's what he's set up in his business for life. Hopefully you'd be able to make a good living and take care of your family and so forth. And instead of saying, I want to just keep selling windows and build my business bigger and bigger, he's like, I want to be a teacher. I'm like, what? I said, what would you want to teach, Russ?
I want to teach truth, the truth about the creation.
Yeah.
And then I asked, what are you doing? I don't know exactly how this timing, what are you doing?
And after he just told me how he'd been just going to school and everything, I was a little bit hesitant about saying, well, actually, let me tell you.
Hinting at these little things, a little bit of earth science. Oh, like what?
Yeah. So he starts pumping me for information. It's like, what are you doing? And I start telling him about some of our experiments and things, and he's like, what?
And then he told me, we've made sandstone. And I said, what? Where? Who?
What do you mean made sandstone?
Yeah. What are you talking about? Yeah, this guy. He's got a lab that you made sandstone in his garage.
Yeah.
By this time, by the way, it's 3:00 in the morning because we've been talking for this
quite a long time.
And I said, okay,
I'm not the only one who can talk, just so you know. Okay, so he can talk just like me. Okay, there we go. That's when we get together. It's just like sparks. It's awesome.
Okay, so
anyway.
What I say? What's this guy's address? I'll drive down there right now. And all of a sudden he's going, whoa,
well, hold on.
I don't even know if this guy wants to talk to you yet. I don't care. I'm going. Where is it? And then he puts me off until...
For like a whole month and a half.
A whole month and a half.
Well, it was February.
And then we have to go... Well, it was November when you called.
Right. But it was February when we finally got together, which is the Tucson Rock and Gem Show, which is the biggest rock and gem show in the whole world there. Basically, the whole world comes to Tucson, Arizona. They cover the entire town with rocks from literally everywhere in the world. I mean, if you go there and you spend a week, and you still will not only see maybe 20% of it.
And it's the most incredible experience. If you love rocks, there's no better place.
If you got rocks in your head, this is the place to be.
He arranges us to meet this guy Now he's the dean of science so far, but I'm going to meet him, know his name here in just a minute.
Yeah, because you don't know him.
And we actually camp in the desert in Tucson.
Because you can't find a hotel because they're all full of rocks too, so everything's full of rocks.
Full of rocks and people that got way ahead of you.
Yes, yeah.
I
Plus, we're young and dumb, and we know how to camp in the desert.
Yeah, we don't care about that. And I cannot wait. I am so stoked. I got to meet this guy that's made sandstone. It's going to be the answer to what we're doing. Yeah. And we get down there, and he introduces me to this guy, Dean Sessions.
Yeah, the dean of science.
Dear friend of mine and Rod's that we both know that we knew him in the other life too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what a great opportunity. And we talked there, and remember the scripture. DNC, I think it's not 121. What is it?
Yeah, 121.
121. And you read that, and that was just.
Give me 1 second here. I'll pull it up real quick here. So let me see here. Yeah, because this has been something that I've known about for a long time, but it became, I wouldn't say a mantra of the Universal Model Project, but it's something that is definitely of interest. For those of us who believe that Joseph Smith actually received revelations, and that was one of them. And I find it fascinating that this is DNC 121, which is when he was in the Liberty Jail.
That's right.
And one of the lowest and probably one of the most important times in his life. He was I mean, this is the point when he's saying, why me, God? What have I done to deserve this kind of thing?
Of Missouri, they were up in Clay County, and then they were driven out again. This is right when the extermination orders issued.
Yeah, and he's watching all this, and he can do nothing because he's stuck in this.
And he voluntarily turned himself into that place where he could do nothing.
Yeah, so. But they call the Liberty Jail the prison temple, because while he was in that utter depths of despair and misery, he also received some of the most poignant and the most beautiful and the most powerful revelations of his life. And this is one of those.
Yes. So much to us now.
And in this is for section 121, verse 26. It says, God shall give unto you knowledge by his Holy Spirit, yea, by the unspeakable gift of the Holy Ghost, that has not been revealed since the world was until now. So he's making a promise to here with Joseph Smith, right? He says, which our forefathers have awaited with anxious expectation to be revealed in these last times, which their minds were pointed to by the angels as held in reserve for the fullness of their glory. A time to come. So at this point, he's there in the Liberty Jail. He says, but this is going to happen in the future. Yeah. A time to come in which the nothing shall be withheld, whether there be one God or many gods, they shall be made manifest. They should be manifest. And I think that Joseph Smith had pretty much nailed that down that early morning in the spring of 1820 in the Sacred Grove, when he saw that God the Father and the Son were two distinct individual people, and they both had physical bodies, right?
Right.
He says, and all thrones and dominions, principalities, and powers shall be revealed and set forth upon all who have endured valiantly for the gospel of Jesus Christ. So it's not just endure, but somebody has to endure valiantly in order for this knowledge to come. And also if there be bounds set to the heavens.
Whether there be bounds.
Yeah, if there be bounds set to the heavens or to the seas or to the dry land, the sun, the moon, and their stars. What kind of concepts are those? Those are scientific concepts. This is physical reality stuff.
Physical earth science,
dry land, seas,
all of it together.
Sun, moon, stars. Okay, and all the times of the revolutions, all the appointed days, months, and years, and all the days of their days, months, and years, and all their glories, laws, and set times shall be revealed.
Their laws, their glories, and their set times. Things of how. What time meant and how it happened and how the laws of science.
Yep. And all these shall be revealed in the days of the dispensation of the fullness of times, which is what we now know we are in. And then it talks about in verse 32, and then in verse 33 it says, how long can rolling waters remain impure? What power shall stay the heavens? Now it's interesting that he compares this with waters, rolling waters. Because you have actually written
I wrote this book on it. Actually, there's a whole chapter in there on the rolling waters. And about how he uses that as a way to describe even how the priesthood distills upon your soul the true. It's
like the dews,
water, like the dews of heaven.
And dews are water, right?
Yes, right. And that's water truly testifies of Christ. It really does.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Okay, so it says, so how long can rolling waters remain impure? What power shall stay the heavens? as well might man stretch forth his puny arm to stop the Missouri River in its decreed course, or to even turn it upstream. I mean, it's one thing to stop a river. It's another thing to make it run backwards. Okay, it's way more, you have to tilt the whole land a different direction.
He's just using stopping of water to stopping knowledge. And we talk about water here being, what happens when you dam the water? Mm-hmm. You stop the flow of how things are going, right? And this man cannot stop the flow of the Missouri or the Mississippi River.
Yeah. And it says to stop the Missouri River in its decreed course, or to even turn it upstream, as to hinder the Almighty from pouring down knowledge from heaven upon who?
The heads.
No, the professors. and academia. The academia, yeah. No, that's not what it says. It actually says upon the heads of the Latter-day Saints.
Oh, yeah.
So where's this new knowledge going to come from? It's going to come from people who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right. the Latter-day Saints. That's what this revelation is saying, that this new knowledge is not going to come forth from academia. It's not going to come forth from professors or other intellectuals. Now, they may be intellectuals within the church, but at least some of this knowledge is going to come through the heads of the Latter-day Saints. That's what it says.
And we talked about that till about 4 o'clock that next morning.
Yeah.
In 2005, February. We're out there at the rock show. And we decide to do something together.
Under God's majesty of the stars and the saguaros over here on this side and this side. It was
beautiful sky.
Yeah.
And so we take our first journey together, our first tour together that year to Mount St. Helens. And Mount St. Helens is a sacred place. And I've gone back many times, and I actually feel like when you go there, this is God's sacred mountain that he did so that we could see on a grand scale how things like the creation and the flood happened. And that has changed the perspective even in modern science. Yeah. But it's especially had an effect on you and I and Dean and our families and what that's meant. So that was kind of our first.
Okay, but we've got to tell you just a little bit because we went to Mount St. Helens. The reason why we were going is because of Spirit Lake up there. There's trees that have root balls that have gone to the bottom of the lake, and then over the course of time, as the lake has had other sediment come into it, it's settled down. It's created all these layers, even though you have these vertical trees
standing in different layers.
Right.
That over in Yellowstone, the same thing occurs, and they said it took 17 eras of forestation to get over here in Spirit Lake.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any sense on Fossil Ridge. I was up there as well. But here we are at Mount St. Helens, and it also has another interesting feature. It's called the Little Grand Canyon. The North Fork of the Tula River. There was as the volcano would belch material up, then it would come down and then actually come down into the valley and start to begin to fill this valley up. It filled it up with over 500 feet, about 600 feet of sediments over the course of about just a few months.
And then years later, when that second eruption in 1982.
And then the little river, the stream, smaller than the Provo River, really, comes down through that, and in 1 year, it cuts a canyon 1/4 mile wide and 500 feet deep.
Revealing thousands of layers of sediment that happened in a matter of days.
And the whole thing in less than 2 years. Yeah. And so, but it's interesting because we got up there and they call it a riparian zone, and you can't go into it. They won't even let you hike into that area at that point in time. So we tried to hike in and you couldn't do it. So we find the only way we're going to be able to get some pictures of these multiple layers, which were put down literally at the same time, is we got to take a helicopter.
So we get this is one of the hilarious things about
and an embarrassing moment for myself.
Early journey in what not to do with film photography. So we get this helicopter. We take the doors off. I mean, we're gonna.
Well, we talked to like 3 or 4 different helicopter companies, and they said no, you can't take the doors off. But if you have doors on it, the plexiglass doors are always all scratched up, and you try to take images through it, it just doesn't work. So we finally convinced one guy. I can't remember. I think it was you actually that slipped them a little extra money.
And we had only 4 seats.
Yeah.
So anyway, we put Rod up front. He's going to be the videographer because he's got the camera and he's supposed to know this.
I'm also the least important of the group. So if I fall out of the helicopter, it's going to be just fine.
The landing gear.
Yeah, we're like hanging out the helicopter.
He's got the best camera.
Yeah, and I'm in the front, right? And so my job is to take pictures, but you're taking pictures in the back, but we had all the doors off, so you could take pictures off the sides.
You were the videographer, we were the picture takers.
Yeah, so I had this awesome video camera, and I'm ready to go, man. And so I pull it up and I look at, and there's the red dot, and I'm like, I'm doing and so forth, and I'm recording. I put it back down and I turn off the red dot, and it turns out
it has it backwards. So we have some incredible.
I have like 10 minutes of my hairy leg down here inside of the helicopter.
No footage.
Every time it comes up, and all of a sudden it goes off.
and when we were flying down the canyon, like we're in Vietnam.
Back and forth, yeah.
We're supposed to be getting this really cool footage, and we get back, and
there's his foot.
That's a really hairy leg there.
Luckily, they got some good shots. But the interesting thing is that we found all kinds of, I mean, it literally looks like the Grand Canyon, but we know it was formed in just a couple of years. And we go, oh my gosh, I mean, why don't people know about this? And there was so much sediment washed out of that little canyon that actually started to plug up the Columbia River, and they had to dredge the river.
70 miles away, shut down shipping.
Yeah, so that was I think one of the first times when I started to really believe that, oh my gosh, maybe things didn't take as long as they thought.
And I was excited because number one, I'd met the guy that knew how to make sandstone, and number two, I'm seeing this laboratory that God had created that was showing things as they would happen in real time.
Yeah.
And
so that was one of our first things.
We went on another tour.
Yeah.
I do a tour every year to the Grand Canyon. And you came with me, Dean and I do this, you came with us, and we tour the Grand Canyon, and you start and you think these guys are crazy, saying the Grand Canyon formed in a really short period.
Yeah.
They think we're nuts. But we go through and talk about these things little by little by little, about how they formed. Go to the meteor crater, Arizona crater.
And all the different things. I mean, where's all the out channel stuff? I mean, where's all the sediment that washed out of the Grand Canyon? There's so many things, like the Grand Canyon, one side is 1,200 feet higher than the other side. The layers are not flat, but in geology the layers should be flat.
But they're not in alignment with each other.
Yeah, they're not in alignment. Yes.
Right.
So I mean, one side is dropped down and the other side is dropped up, and there's this great unconformity and all kinds of weird stuff that's not supposed to be happening if it happened the way that we're all taught and told in geology. And so we've hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon together, and we've been and all kinds of places that we've gone to do this. And sandstone is an amazing thing. You would like to know how sandstone is? I'll tell you. Read the book.
Read the universal model.
That's right.
The thing is, we've been busy working on our stuff. You've got there came a time, even though we worked together on the universal model, we both had a different mission to do.
Yeah.
And yours, oh my gosh, look what it's done.
Well, mine, I was working with the Dean of Science, Dean Sessions. Yep. To do a lot of the research behind the scenes and so forth, and Dean was taking that information and compiling it and figuring things out, and then we moved to Utah. We actually were living in Utah at the time, but then I got involved with this thing that I took my family up to the conference center about 2003 or so, about 2003, 2004. And there was this big banner that says DNA proves the Book of Mormon is false, so I used my ability to access libraries all across the country through the universal model to begin doing research on the DNA stuff, and then that turned into basically what I do now. And so tell us what happened with you.
And so what happened, see, this is before you and I met, but you were doing, the research wasn't just, universal model's not just about geography and geology and that.
Oh,
it goes into DNA.
It's called universal for a reason.
Right. And so the research you were doing was very specific about the stuff that was going to be in the universal model. What was interesting, though, is it took you on another journey that eventually, right after probably 2007 or 8, I don't know when, but that's when you started on that.
Yeah.
And mine was, I ended up editing for 10 years. I edited and rewrote the whole universal model in a way that made it consumable and changed my life, changed our family's life, because we had this resource of truth that was right here. Now, I like to say it's not all correct because we're just men making these things out, but it's true. And the majority of what's in there are based on true principles of things that really happened.
It's kind of like Moroni said, if there are errors, they're the errors of men. Okay, but
fools mock, but they shall mourn.
Yeah, the general things though are fully compatible with the scriptures, number one.
Yes.
But number two, they're fully compatible with the data, the facts of geology and chemistry and astronomy and so forth. So we have over, I think there's 15,000 or so references in the regular peer-reviewed scientific journals. So this is not some crazy wild-eyed thing, although some people have tried to do a synopsis of it and say, well, it's kind of crazy, but it's kind of like saying, well, here's Joseph Smith thinks he's going to change all of Christianity because of one event that happened in his life. Well, you know what? That event happened. It was true, and it actually does change everything.
It does change. And right now it's 2 volumes. There's a third one going to be eventually out. It's 1,600 pages. Of
So the volume 1 is the universal model. Volume 1 is basically the earth science stuff. Then volume 2 is the living system.
Talks about evolution and the alternative and what the true alternative is to that based on the gospel, and talks about dating.
Because there's a true part of evolution, there's a false part of evolution.
Yes.
And really evolution comes down to dating. If you take away immense amounts of time, then basically so.
And we have to have another time to talk about that too.
Yeah, and then the third volume is basically the universe system. So basically, when I kind of was doing the work on the research on the DNA of the Book of Mormon, what were you doing?
I'm editing the whole and that takes me 10 years or so. And once that's done, I realize it changed my family so much. But what's really cool is it starts lining and bringing together the scriptures in a way I never could have imagined. And I started to look, okay, let's look at these things. How do they tie together? And I noticed that the change in modern science happened exactly in sync with what happened in the gospel, about the restoration of the gospel. And so you've got this shift in modern science toward this more secular viewpoint. At the same time, the gospel's being restored. And I've come to realize, in a way, what that's done is it's fictionalized the gospel by making the Genesis account something that's a myth. And you're told that it's a myth creation story, that man was here before. The fossil record tells us all this stuff. And I've come to realize through this research that that's not true.
The scriptures are literal.
Are absolutely true. And the mythology and the things that we're told in modern secular science are simply, they're this without a foundation.
like the great and spacious building in Lehi's dream.
You said
it. Anyway.
So and what that did is and we started realizing we've got to teach the rising generation, because if we don't change what the rising generation, these kids that are going to school, if we don't change that, we're going to lose them. We're going to lose all of them.
No, we are.
And that's what's happening. We see
a lot
it right now.
Yes.
We're losing such a high percentage. Kids that have more faith in science than they do in the gospel, because we've made the gospel not true, in the sense that the Genesis account is just a myth, and it's not. It's true.
Yeah, and it's also in the same token as the Narnia map. That has been being used in church education, actually, that shows a mythical place that has all the Book of Mormon stuff on it, is teaching that the Book of Mormon is Narnia. It's a
well, let me share you my favorite scripture here that kind of, I think it ties into both what you're doing and what I'm doing. It's the scripture that says right here, 2 Nephi chapter 1 verse 10, and it's talking about when the time comes. Lehi's talking about this. He's prophesying, when the time comes that they shall dwindle in unbelief, after they've received so great blessings from the hand of the Lord, having a knowledge of creation of the earth and all men, knowing the great and marvelous works of the Lord from the creation, which means those things that happened after the creation, like the fall and the flood and the Exodus, all those things, having a knowledge of those things. Now this is Lehi talking 600 BC, He says he's looking forward. He says, you had all this knowledge. And when you dwindle in unbelief after having all this knowledge and having faith that you can do all these things, and even, it says here, having been brought to this precious land of promise,
which is going into what I've been
what you're
working with, yeah.
And it says, when they reject the Holy One of Israel, the true Messiah, their Redeemer and God, behold, the judgments of him that is just shall rest upon them. We're at a time when the judgments of God are resting upon us simply because as a nation and maybe even as a people, we've rejected the true creation account that's in the scriptures. Now, we're not talking just King James Version, but Joseph Smith received this revelation to translate the Bible just 2 months after the Book of Mormon was published. The Lord didn't give him any rest. Get to work. And the first thing he does is receive this marvelous revelation that we know as Moses chapter 1.
Yeah.
And the creation account is made real for him. So that's our journey. Our truth seeker's journey has been seeking for truth, which is knowledge of things as they are, as they were, and as they are to be, right? Past, present, future, doesn't change. Yep. And that's been our journey.
So everybody, go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to continue to see content like this. It's interesting because a lot of times podcasters are always asking for money and so forth, to please donate and so forth. We haven't asked for that. We haven't done that. We just the best way you can support us actually is just by subscribing and learning about this. If you want to go and do a deeper dive, we have the streaming website, which has over 1,500 one-hour presentations, including from Russ and Dean and so many others. About 450 presenters have had the opportunity to share their knowledge and information. So if learning is your thing, if you love to find out new things and explore new research,
and you want to bring those together, not just learning, but learning gospel and science.
That's right. Then this is the place to be. That's right. All right, everybody.
We're going to do this again, but we got to get.
Yeah, we've got an appointment with an ambassador.
That's right.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you.
Talk to you later.